it will happen. Bang on time. There we go. So please let us know if you've got any issues, or stay quiet, I suppose, in the chat. But I think that would be okay. We share these recordings on the CDPS YouTube channel, so they're available to watch at a later date on demand. So today we are concentrating on retention of digital staff, looking at what kind of things an organisation can do to retain these people with the highly sought after digital skills that we've been talking about. A little bit about sort of succession planning, or ensuring you have a pipeline of future talent lined up. So as ever, the structure is pretty straightforward. I'm going to disappear in a moment and hand over to the experts. So we've got Lauren up first, and Lauren's our embedded talent partner who knows all about these sorts of things, and will be telling us about how we work in CDPS and what we do here to ensure people want to stay, feel welcome and want to stay. And we're joined today by two special guests. I'm delighted to have with us Alan Lee from the Welsh Revenue Authority, who will be talking about what they've been doing to set themselves up for success in this way, and also Tara from Sport Wales, and she'll be talking a little bit about the digital restructure and their methods for retaining talent too. We leave plenty of let's get my words right. We leave plenty of time for questions at the end. Please ask away during the session as well, but we'll definitely come back. So I'll come back at the end to try and steer some of those questions to people who know a bit more about answering well. So on that note, I think Lauren's ready. I can see a nod. Fantastic. So I'm going to be quiet and hand over to Lauren straight away. Thanks very much, Lauren.
Yeah, fab. Thanks, Pete. And yeah, just to kind of reintroduce myself, as Pete said, my name's Lauren Power, and I've been partnered with CDPS since April last year as their internal talent partner via Future Heads Recruitment. And to just kind of cover off what the main focus will be for my part in this webinar, I'll be giving you an overview of the current trends within the market, as well as sharing CDPS's retention and attrition strategy. But I just wanted to kind of preface this presentation to say that, obviously it's fairly unrealistic to expect kind of 100% of your employees to stay in an organisation for the entirety of their career. And when I talk to hiring managers within CDPS, they're very much of the mindset that they want employees to kind of develop and learn what they can from this organisation. And when the time comes for them to progress beyond their current role, then obviously that's a natural progression, and we're grateful to be part of their career journey. However, what we do want to avoid are people leaving due to factors that are within our control, and that's really what I'll be focusing on here. Good. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, to start, I wanted to cover off the main factors that lead to people wanting to leave roles. So the first reason is work-life balance. Obviously, since COVID, there's been a real movement towards remote working and flexible working hours becoming the norm. And if places are unable or unwilling to offer this, it can really cause workers to start to look elsewhere. And I'm sure this is, really no surprise to anyone, but the second reason is salary and benefits. So companies not reviewing their pay and benefits offerings to be competitive within the market. Next is working environment. So this is referring to company and team culture. And then we have progression opportunities, or even lack of progression opportunities. And finally, lack of job security can also lead workers to want to leave a company. And one statistic that I wanted to share, which I found really interesting, was the fact that the average time people are spending in roles is now 4.1 years, with workers aged 25 to 34 actually averaging at 2.8 years. So the workforce is definitely trending towards being a lot more fluid than it used to be. And it may be a better strategy to almost lean into this more, have an expectation that someone may likely leave after this time, and set up attrition plans for workers to step into these roles, creating that progression pathway that way. So To jump into what CDPS do to help create a positive experience for staff, I feel like a good place to start would be the onboarding experience. You know, it's important that this process is streamlined, clear and supportive, as this is really the employee's first real impression of your organisation. And as a remote first employer, we want to provide plenty of opportunities for new members of staff to engage with their managers and team members, and also have really clear expectations of what their work and future at the company looks like. We have created an onboarding Trello board that captures all the need to know information for the new joiner. Sorry, Lisa, if you go back to the last slide, thank you, sorry. Yeah, so this Trello board, it captures all the need to know information for the new joiners to work through in their first week. This is sent to them a week before they're set to join, and we also announce their arrival on a welcome Slack channel. And we encourage team members to get in touch with them, and we also make some social media posts to kind of really make them feel welcomed and part of that team. We also set up meetings with line managers and team members and our business manager as well, to help ensure they have the required kit to work from home, and they have plenty of kind of touch points in order to raise any concerns that they may have. And then even at these early stages, it's a good idea to kind of start planning for their long-term future and development in the company too. Thank you. And it's really important that you're creating a culture of recognition and feedback. You know, employees want to feel valued and appreciated for their contributions to the company, and building on that culture can really go a long way in helping these employees, you know, feel seen and heard, and therefore less likely to seek validation elsewhere. So a few ways that we try and build this into our company culture is, you know, practicing continuous listening, you know, using annual surveys to gather employee feedback. We also host town hall meetings where the floor is really open to the team to raise any questions and issues. I'd also suggest regular one-on-ones with employees, you know, reviewing performance together, offering and asking feedback, and discussing career development in these meetings as well. And I'd also create an employee recognition program through peer-to-peer recognition, you know, public and private praise from managers and company shout-outs as well. We really do this actively at CDPS, and I hope Harriet doesn't mind me sharing this, but I thought it was a really sort of excellent example with her comments on the slide there, you know, of a CEO kind of taking time out of their day to recognise a job well done and then posting that on our recognition Slack channel. Next slide, please, thank you. I also wanted to touch upon development strategies for employees. So employees want to know that they have a future at your company, and if they don't see it, they'll start to look for it somewhere else. That's why employee development is key for engaging and retaining top talent year after year. We try to address this by, you know, prioritising internal hires and promotions when possible, providing opportunities for coaching and mentorship. And, you know, that's not just education opportunities for that employee, but giving them opportunities to share their knowledge and for others to learn from their expertise as well. Also, we offer support in wider education. If someone has taken what they can from a role from a professional standpoint, offering kind of educational progression can really make people stay in a company that bit longer. We've also implemented associate level roles at CDPS. I provided the structure of our delivery team to give you an understanding of where these roles would fit in. But, you know, this is a really great opportunity for your more experienced members of staff to share their knowledge, you know, ensuring that this knowledge is retained in the business. It also creates really clear pathways and attrition plans if there are any leavers. And these associate level roles are often a bit easier to recruit into as well, because you can really just hire based off of potential. So it's a great way to inject some new knowledge and expertise into the Welsh public sector as well. And staff are more likely to stay loyal to their employer if they are being supported beyond day-to-day working life. One way of supporting staff is through the inclusion of flexible working policies and benefit schemes. So some example of policies that are being implemented at CDPS are our period and menopause policy. So this supports an inclusive working environment for all employees through all stages of their working lives. We also have flexible working policy. So we're recognising that a better work-life balance can improve staff motivation, performance, and also reduce stress. We also have implemented a carers policy. So it's estimated that around 1 in 7 of the Welsh workforce have caring responsibilities. So we require our managers to be, sympathetically considering any requests for support as well. And these are really just to name a few of the policies that we've implemented, and we're hoping to get a full breakdown of our policies on the website soon. And finally, as I mentioned at the start of the presentation, you really can't avoid some employee turnover, but whether you have a high turnover or a low turnover, you can really gain important insights from employees who are leaving. I'd really encourage organisations to use exit surveys to get direct feedback from your soon-to-be ex-employees on exactly why they're leaving and what suggestions they may have for improving the company. This way you get really honest and direct feedback, and it's important then to not sit on this information and to implement that change wherever you can. Yeah, these are just some of the processes that CDPS are implementing to help with retention of staff. A lot of the resources that I've spoken about will be uploaded to the website, but obviously if you'd like any more information, please feel free to get in touch. Yeah, I'll hand you over. I think Alan's next. I'll hand you over to Alan.
Okay, thank you very much. So hello, my name is Alan Lee and I am the lead developer at the Welsh Revenue Authority. Just as a quick intro, Welsh Revenue Authority was set up in 2018 to collect 2 devolved taxes, the catchily titled Land Transaction Tax and Landfill Disposals Tax. I'm going to focus today on our apprentices, 3 apprentices, and it is in fact Apprenticeship Week 2023. Anybody care? No, nobody cares, but it is. And I'll quickly go over our recruitment of digital apprentices. And then I want to talk briefly about 2 factors that affect retention of developers, the career progression, and then the developer experience. So first, as just a bit of background, systems we had were first provided by an external provider when we opened our doors in 2018. I, at the time, was a developer working in a data team, working on sort of small scripts and apps and things. That morphed into building even bigger apps and to combat a lot of shadow IT that was going on in a new organization. And that kind of led to the job of lead developer being set up in 2019. And that's the start of the journey, really, of bringing more IT in the house. And at much the same time, we recruited 3 new apprentices. So the scheme was new. It was introduced by the University of South Wales. The primary driver for that, primary interested party was Capgemini. We sort of tagged onto it. It's designed to last 4.5 years, this degree apprenticeship. Its structure is at a 6-week full-time bit at the start, so like a sort of boot camp crash course thing to get everybody set up. And then some lectures then ongoing for the 4 years or 4.5 years. And it's every 3rd Friday afternoon. When we recruited them, we did it in an interesting way that I was quite pleased with, that we didn't specify any digital requirements up front. These are going to be new developers that we're going to develop, I guess, with the university. So we didn't need them to be developers at the start. They were going to learn all those skills. So it was more about assessing their collaboration skills and the behaviors that we want. And anyway, after doing all that, 3 apprentices were successfully hired that autumn. First, 2 things I just want to talk about how we are seeking to retain our staff. The first one, we're sort of chasing our tails a little with. So we decided to create 3 new higher paid roles for the apprentices to move into. we decided to do that now rather than wait for their 4.5-year degree to finish. The reason for that being that is kind of multi-layered, but one of the reasons is simple fairness. We're just looking at the work that they're doing, and we just think, well, we can no longer reasonably pay you what we're paying you. We need to pay you more. So we're creating those roles now. Also, 4.5 years is just a very long time to spend being effectively a learner. So while they're still on the degree course, they will finish that. We're getting these new roles set up now. The other reason for doing it is that we always should have done it, really. So when we hired the apprentices, we didn't really have a progression plan. We just thought, let's get some apprentices in. We got some apprentices in, and we all thought, yay, we have apprentices. But we didn't have a plan for saying, okay, they're on an apprenticeship course. What do we do when they graduate? Do we have jobs lined up? Is there a plan? Do we change a job description? Do we start splitting them up into different types of developers? There was no plan for what happens at the end of the 4 years. So what we did was, that's the point. We didn't do anything. So what we're doing now is sort of retrofitting a pathway where we say, okay, you could be on this grade for this amount of time during your course, the first 3 years or 4 years or whatever it is. Then after that, you have a role you can move into, pending performance and all the rest of it, and you can build it that way. The idea is that should we recruit additional apprentices, which we're hopefully looking to do, but maybe not, maybe we will, we'll see. We can do so with this plan already in place, so we can articulate that to the apprentice up front and say, okay, if you join us and you do well, this is how your career ought to go. So we're hoping to recruit additional apprentices in future. With a plan in place, we could make that conditional promise at the outset. And the only other thing I want to take a bit of time with today to talk about is something that's I'm increasingly hearing about, called the developer experience. I think people on the call ought to be familiar with the concept of user experience and how it's important to get that right. Well, there's another version of that called developer experience. The idea is that you should have happy developers, and then they'll make good code, that sort of thing. So it's kind of split in two, in my mind: the technology, the tools they're using, and then the way of working, the approach. So on the technology side, I think it's important that we choose technology that makes the life of a developer easier. So, for example, use a modern JavaScript framework instead of something like jQuery. If you're on a framework, backend framework, like Java or .NET or something, keep it up to date, because you enable your developers to do more with less code if you're using more up-to-date things. Ensure they've got access to the right IDE, give them the ability to customize it. Just ask things like, have you restricted your laptops of your developers? Can they download the tools they need? Most are free, but do you have the budget to afford to provide them with tools that they need to do their job? That sort of thing really helps them feel happy and in control of their work. And the other important thing is ways of working. So CDPS, in fact, has recently introduced agile working to the WRA, which we're very grateful for. Didn't set up a service team necessarily, but we ran a project using the agile approach. I think it's great. I was instantly won over, and I think it's important that we stay in tune with these kinds of working practices and implement them where we can, because the reason they've become popular is because they're good. So I wouldn't want us to look at working practice elsewhere, say, oh, that's good, and then not do it here. We should respond to these things. And I think it's important to note that these decisions have little direct impact on the end user, but because they have a big impact on the quality of life of the developer, they ship better code faster. It all makes developers feel happy with the environment they're in, and it ought to help recruitment as well as retention, because developers are less inclined to work somewhere with ancient code bases and tired business practices. And I think that's probably it for me. So I think
dive in and interrupt that, and thank you ever so much. That's Good stuff. We've had a couple of questions in, so I wonder if we can tackle them now, if that's okay.
Oh,
Tara,
all right, bear with.
Okay. So there was one that came in a little bit earlier that said, this is from Nali. Hello, Nali, thanks for joining us. The increase of salary in the roles, how do you get funding for them, please? And the comment that it's a good plan.
Yeah, it's hard work, the funding, isn't it? The WRA is it's in a neat little place, really, where it can claim to be part of Welsh Government when it needs to be, and it can claim a level of independence when it needs that. And so if you're in an organisation where you're faced with some challenges around not increasing headcount or not increasing headcount in particular grades and all the rest of it, we're actually very fortunate that we have a lot more control over our own budget, so we can make that decision. So because we've got that more granular control, if we wanted to do something like this, it's situational. The money has to be there, obviously, but we can take advantage of the situation. Often I find larger organizations and stuff, it's not that the money isn't there, it's just that you've got blanket rules that are applying. It makes it difficult for you to respond. We're just fortunate that we're in that position where we can respond.
Okay, fab, thank you very much. I think that answered that one nicely. There's no more questions at the moment. There's a comment that's come directly in about somebody getting in touch with you, and thanking you for your openness and sharing. And on that note, if that's okay, thank you very much from me. I'm going to hand over to Tara now. Tara from Sport Wales, to tell us all about how they do their retention of digital talent. Okay, Tara, everything okay?
Cheers, thanks Pete. Hi everyone, I'm Tara Rosen. I'm the Digital and Service Design Programme Manager at Sport Wales, and I'm going to be talking to you today a bit about our digital restructure that we went through last year, our apprenticeship programme, and the 3 core ways that we're aiming to retain digital talent. So a little bit about Sport Wales first. We're a public sector body responsible for developing and promoting sport and physical activity in Wales. And we started working with the CDPS on a project around funding services in, I believe it was 2021, which really highlighted to us that we needed to start thinking differently about our digital talent and the need to develop a designated team to carry on all that we had learned about agile ways of working and digital transformation, all from that experience. So following on from that, last year we went through a bit of a digital restructure. So we created a new team called the Digital and Service Design team. And if you could just pop over to the next slide, you should see some of those roles popping on the screen now. And most of those roles were actually internal moves from existing employees who were working across different teams in the organisation, sort of doing digital as part of their day job, but had other commitments to juggle too. And we realised that in order to meet our user needs and retain the talent that we had, we needed to empower folks to take ownership of areas like service design, user research, and programme management. This has had a really positive effect on how projects are started across the business and the scale at which we've been able to embed Agile much deeper. But it also allows people to work on projects that they're passionate about full time and develop their skills for the next role. And the roles that we've recruited externally for are the digital apprentices, that you see at the end there. And I'll come on to talking about them. It's actually really interesting hearing about the WRA and how they do apprenticeships, because we actually do ours a little bit differently. So we actually started last year. We hired in 2 apprentices and we're looking to hire a 3rd in the near future. And the apprenticeship programme is essentially a collaboration between Cardiff Met, Welsh Government and us. So the Welsh Government supply the funding, we supply the apprentices and hire them, and Cardiff Met University teach. We also supply a mentor, which is myself, to make sure that the apprentices are supported in their career development and are able to cope with their work and study commitments. So the way it works is our 2 apprentices are employed with us with a salary and benefits like any other full-time member of staff, but they also get day release to one day a week, normally a Monday, to go and study at Cardiff Met for their software engineering degree, and then work with us as you typically would the rest of the week. And every 6 months or so, they move to different areas of digital within the organisation. So sometimes they'll be working on more the infrastructure IT side of things. Sometimes they'll be working on the web development side of things, and then just in general product, the other side of the time as well. And their contract lasts 3 years. So just the same amount of time that a typical bachelor's degree would take you. And by the end of those 3 years, they'll either leave us with a bachelor's degree and 3 years of experience working full-time in a digital role, or hopefully step into one of the roles that we've outlined in the new digital restructure. I should also point out at this part that the degree part of the programme is not just for new employees. Existing employees can also enrol on the degree. Myself as an example, I'm on the degree too, which also makes my role as a mentor and manager to the apprentices actually a lot easier. So I know today is based on retention, but I do just want to quickly touch on how we recruited for these roles, because I think it sets a really important context. So our most important 2 things going into this recruitment process was hiring for passion over skill and having a really relaxed recruitment process that could support people who are interested. So we made it really clear that we weren't interested in skill or experience at all. We just wanted people passionate about the sports sector and who bought into our vision. Partly because we wanted to be true to the purpose of the entry-level roles, but also because we felt that that was an important strategy in keeping people long-term, people who were really bought into our vision. And something that really helped with this is, as the post was live, myself and other colleagues held drop-in sessions over Teams where anyone interested in the role could come along to ask questions, and not just about the role, it could be questions about anything to do with Sport Wales. And this proved really valuable. We had the most applications for these roles that we've ever had before, and we attracted people who already knew about our mission and were already on board with it. So now we have the apprentices and the internal roles in place. There are 3 main ways that we're aiming to retain them, which are community and belonging, shared input on culture, and career development. And I'll jump straight into belonging to a community, which I believe is the, yeah, there we go, the previous slide. So as an organisation, Sport Wales is really big on things like team building and making you feel like you're a part of the sports sector. So teams across the organisation have regular planned activities that revolve around sport or activity in some way. Last week, one of my apprentices, Anselm, went and visited a sports club to learn about their experiences of our services. And he's also a really excellent basketball coach. So we actually had an activity where he gave a coaching session to some folks in the team, which you can see in the 3rd picture along. And if you look on the slide at the very last picture, that's me attempting to throw an axe in a team building day and doing it really badly. And because it's a collaborative role, we also really wanted them to feel like they were part of the Cardiff Met community as well. And this is something that Cardiff Met really stressed too. So sometimes I'll go spend a day working on the Cardiff Met campus with the apprentices. And I took them to Freshers' Fair last year, as you can see in the first picture, which made me feel absolutely ancient, but it was really good fun, and it really made them feel like full members of the Cardiff Met community. So the next thing that we're focusing on is shared input on digital culture. So we really want to retain talent by empowering them to have real input and ownership on culture, not just in the workplace sense, like in the previous slide, but also just how we work in the digital space. So while the team was still quite new, I led on this project of developing a set of digital principles, which are basically a set of standards by which we say, hey, this is how we want to deliver digital service and products and how we want to work together. And all members of the team fed into this, and it ended up being a really collaborative project where everyone in the team felt like they had a stake in it. It's kind of hard to see on this slide, but the image on the far right shows different iterations of the principles, along with all the feedback that's gone into that iteration on little post-it notes. And many of those post-it notes came from the apprentices. So the last thing that we're focusing on and is particularly important to us as the apprentices move in their journey with the degree is career development. I find this is particularly important for digital roles because the landscape of what tools and skills are being used in the tech space just changes so quickly that people are really keen on having the most up-to-date training and experience. And an important part of the apprenticeship is trying to mirror what they're learning in university with what they're working on the rest of the week. This is definitely sometimes really challenging, but we try and do it where we can. So, for example, they just finished up a module on data management, and they're now working on a Microsoft Azure project with some of the infrastructure folks here. So they can directly take what they've learned directly into their work experience. And now we've got a new team in place. There's a much more clearly defined career pathway for them and roles that they can step into when they graduate, should they wish to remain with us, which hopefully they do. And training beyond the degree, I have to say this is something our HR is really good at. We're quite lucky to have a decent training budget where our teammates can get things like certifications in Agile or Microsoft or Scrum or Kanban really easily. From my experience, this is something our talent really appreciates, particularly in the public sector, where budgets can be restraints. And so those are really the three core things we're focusing on. But I just wanted to end what I'm talking about today about thinking about looking into the future, particularly the near future, and what we're thinking about. So the first thing is that we know job security is a really big selling point for working in the public sector over private, I think, as Lauren mentioned. But we anticipate that this is kind of even more important over the next 6 to 12 months. There's a bit of research that came out in January of this year looking at the UK tech sector, where 53% of workers looking for a new role were preemptively applying for new roles over fears of redundancies at their company. So as people become more nervous about what's happening with tech redundancies, we aim to give our talent as much peace of mind as possible and work with them to develop the skills that they would need to step into their next role internally with us or elsewhere. And the last thing that we're focusing on next year is being really open to how career development goals progress over time and how we can utilise that to deliver on business and user needs, particularly for our apprentices. Specialisms and interests are going to naturally develop over time. Already, one of our apprentices is really keen on cybersecurity, so we're thinking about how best to nurture them while also meeting our business goals. And that is pretty much it from me. On the final slide, I have some contact details if you'd like to connect or ask any questions that you don't get a chance to now. And thank you for listening, and I'll pass you back to Pete.
Bab, thank you very much, Tara. Good stuff. We've got a couple of comments, so I'm going to raise these now, if that's okay. Nali's asked a question, commented it was a nice point, the piece you were talking about. But out of curiosity, are there any pieces of collaboration between your internal team and any of the councils, for example, or other organisations I'm extending that to outside? And how do you go about recruiting the apprentices?
Oh, good question. I think collaborating with other organisations is probably something we could do a lot better at, if I'm transparent. We collaborate a lot with other partners within the sports sector, and we tend to find that staff move around certain organisations quite quickly and end up coming to us. But in terms of public sector organisations, we could probably do more. We do have really good relationships with the CDPS and have worked with projects on them, which, like Alan with the WRA, really introduced us into agile ways of working. There was a second question there, how we recruited them.
Thank you. That was about recruiting the apprentices.
So we recruited them as we would any other role, really. Just advertised on our website, advertised on LinkedIn. The only big difference was, like I mentioned, the drop-in sessions. Because it was it's quite an unusual role. You get a free degree, you're still working full-time, and it's entry level. We wanted to make sure that people really understood A, what they were signing up for, and B, if they had any questions, that's completely normal and our doors are wide open. And it proved to be a really successful strategy in recruiting, and it's something that for entry-level roles going forward in the organisation, we're going to be doing a lot more of, I think.
Thank you. Right, this next one's a really juicy question. So, Lauren, I think this is coming to you first, but we'll open it up as well. This one's from Robin, so thanks very much for this. Is there a risk of the public sector being seen as providing a pipeline of well-trained staff ripe for poaching by the private sector? And then what does success look like in terms of retention, particularly in terms of the actions being taken to address this? So I don't know, Lauren, do you want to chip in on that one first, please?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a juicy, very topical question. Yeah, I think, there's always a risk that you're gonna, invest time and money training people up, and eventually once they've sort of finished this program, they could potentially look to move into the private sector. But this is where the kind of other retention strategies come into play that are outside of purely that sort of financial mindset. So, if you're working with them closely, really getting to the sort of understanding of where they want their career to go, prioritizing that career pathway, putting them on maybe different educational pathways as well, to help them get from A to B, then, you really need to look at it as, if you have them for sort of 3 to 6 years, that's 3 to 6 years that your company has had with an excellent employee, and that's definitely a huge plus and a huge sort of benefit. And if you're getting them to kind of work closely with other members of staff and allowing them to kind of upskill them as well, so that you're retaining that knowledge and keeping that kind of attrition strategy in play, then you shouldn't be in a position where you're kind of losing talent and you haven't got somebody there to backfill it, or you're losing talent and they're taking all of their knowledge and understanding of the organization and the role away with them as well. So it's really just about kind of confronting the fact that people could leave. It is likely that people can leave, but you need to have processes in place to make sure that knowledge is somewhat retained, and yeah, you're working with them closely to see what factors that they're having, what factors are their move motivators really, so that you can address those before it gets to a point where they're looking for other roles.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm just going to add, I'll open it up to Alan and Tara as well in a moment if you want to be thinking caps on about that in your perspective. I was just going to say, we've talked to lots of people who are currently in private sector roles and not completely happy to devote in all their time and effort to making money for that company and looking for an opportunity to come back to public sector and do a bit of social good to, I don't know if it's to ease their consciences, but it's to actually, do the good for their community, the place they grew up. And yeah, there's definitely something there about, bringing people back to do that kind of work. Okay, Alan, over to you. Any comments on that one, please?
Yeah, sure. So the first part about the public sector pipeline thing, I think I worry about that too, Robin. But I've resolved to only worry about it when I see it, because what I've observed so far is an apprenticeship scheme set up with the USW that we are a part of, where about 14 of the apprentices were private sector and our 3 were public. So 14 were private, 3 were public. So I'm not going to worry over much about it being a public sector pipeline. I feel there are sufficient private sector apprentices out there that if one of ours got poached by a private sector organisation, well, all right, I'll poach one of theirs. So I don't feel that there's an imbalance yet. It all could come a cropper though, couldn't it? R3 could leave and then we won't be able to get anybody else. But from what I've seen, I don't quite think we're in that position, I hope. The second part of what you say is far more interesting. I don't have an answer, but I do think about this a lot. What does success look like in terms of retention? Because I actually worry that if you keep the same member of staff on for 20 years, that's not necessarily a success. You're just going to end up with a lot of idiosyncrasies. The chair is going to mold to fit them, or the code base is going to be entirely idiosyncratic and full of their foibles and things like that. And it's all going to become settled. And a little bit of throughput and a little bit of people from other organizations coming in and being part of a more fluid environment, I don't think is a bad thing. I kind of think that's a good thing. So I think if your staff were leaving every year and you had to recruit every year, that's not success. That looks bad. But I think similarly, if you've got the same half a dozen of people there for the 20, 30 years and you've never had anybody new come in, that to me doesn't look great either. So maybe maybe people do need to leave to leave gaps for you to fill with other people and to have a little bit of turnover. Maybe that is healthy. So I don't think it's a retain for the longest time possible. I don't think is success. I think there's a happy medium somewhere. There's an optimal amount of time for somebody to stay in post. I've no idea what that time is, but I feel people could stay in post too long as well as a too short amount of time.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective, actually. Thank you, Alan. Just thinking about, like you mentioned in when you were speaking about software tools changing and people wanting to be on, the latest one or the greatest one in the industry at the time and things like that. So, yeah, that is interesting. Tara, are you worried about losing these people that you're training up?
It's a good question. I think there always is a degree of risk. But just coming off of what Alan has said, actually, and I have no research to back up what I'm about to say, it's just my instinct and what I've learned from experience, is that with technical roles or digital roles, your retention is naturally going to be slightly lower than with other roles within the same organisation or across the public sector, partly because of what Alan's talking about there, of the landscape changes so quickly that good candidates want the most up-to-date skills and experience as possible. And I completely agree with P, actually, in that the biggest selling point for me working in the public sector is definitely that sense of service. So I started out my career in private and third sector and then moved into public, partly because of work-life balance, but partly because I just really enjoy that sense of service you get and that focus on user needs that comes with working in a public sector role. So for me, that's always going to be the biggest selling point. And that almost doesn't quite start with retention. I actually think that goes all the way back to recruitment and how you search for people. But I do agree that there is always a degree of risk, but there are definitely so many pros to working in this space that can mitigate against that.
Yeah, good thinking. Thank you very much. Yeah, I think overall, I think Lauren's advice at the start there was, let's face into it. It's going to happen, at maybe a faster or slower rate than you were anticipating, but at least, prepare, get like you've done, both organizations, put that pipeline in place, start thinking about it, and keep that in mind. Interestingly, Robin's put something back in the chat about very impressed with the nurturing talent aspects discussed here today. Slight concern about whether staff in non-digital roles may get a sense of one group being more nurtured than them. Definitely interesting. Any thoughts on any of that? Anybody want to comment?
Sounds like a them problem. I don't know. I don't know. I just don't know.
Yeah, I would say that all of the points kind of raised within the webinar should kind of be seen as best practice across all departments within an organisation. You should always be actively listening, looking to support people in the best ways they can, offering development opportunities. That's kind of just best practice for retention anyway. So yeah, I would just say to try and remain consistent across the board with that.
Thank you. I'm just having a quick scan through the chat. So David has posted a couple of points here. So agreeing, that they've lost people to the private sector and other public sector organisations. That's another story altogether, I think. After investing in heavily as apprenticeships and apprentices and undergrads, but it comes with the territory, and there's still more benefit to doing it than not. Where we've been able to deliver apprenticeships, we generally keep more than we lose. And I think that's some of the experience I've heard as well, where people have spent time in the organisation, they feel part of it as well as getting their qualifications through the apprenticeship route. David also had a question specifically for Tara on some of the new roles, so I'm going to tackle that one next, if that's okay. And this was about the new roles that were created to underpin the new approach to digital. And some of those roles came from promotions and transfers from within the service, but outside of digital. Can you elaborate on the type of skills you were looking for to fill in some of those roles?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's something we had to look a lot at. So I'm going to sort of tackle this in two parts. So the skills that we were really looking for in the first sort of round of the restructure were program and product management, service design, digital infrastructure, and user research. And in terms of finding people with the skills to do that internally, we took a lot of people from communications team. We took a lot of people who are working in research, qualitative and quantitative, because we have an insights team that do work within the sports sector and research or user research. We already had people a bit trained up in service design, but were more on the side of the non-digital services and figuring out how those worked. So we did find people with a lot of synergies that could very, very easily transfer over and just fill in any training gaps with training budgets and things like that. And they were people already kind of doing this as part of their job, but just juggling other things as well. So the way digital transformation worked in Sport Wales before we had a restructure is we had something called a digital steering group. I know steering group sounds like the stuff of nightmares, where people from different teams would get together, greenlight projects, discuss how projects would work, deliver them, as well as bringing in capacity from CDPS as well. So they were sort of already doing those roles, but just a bit hodgepodge. So it was quite easy, to be honest, to find similarities between different roles. And I certainly know the comms to product management pipeline is very much alive and well in the public sector. There are definitely a lot of synergies between teams that you already have and more digital side of things that you can bring in. I hope that adequately answers it.
Fascinating. Okay, thank you very much. We've got some more comments. I think we've set off a bit of a conversation here, which is great. So thanks everybody for commenting. Simon has mentioned, this is back to the retention challenge in particular. Private sector has the same retention challenge. This is Simon from CDPS with us. For example, they might train a member of staff in cybersecurity skills to meet the needs in their company, but often that member of staff might move somewhere else for more money. But to help address this in Wales, we've invested significantly in the number of training opportunities and to increase the future pipeline just to meet that need. And then Harriet's come in with some really interesting things. So Harriet's our CEO in CDPS. So thanks for joining us, Harriet. And Harriet says, I've tried to build a sense of my organisation as being a great place to work and a great place to move on from, which is a really interesting perspective. But finishes off with saying the critical thing is that we want people who are passionate about our mission across the sector, delivering public services. So it's hitting on at least what Tara was saying about hiring for passion rather than skills, and then training for skills. And one last comment, and I think we're probably coming close to time now, so this is good. So Anne has mentioned that if we work out what money's been invested in contract staff or contingent labour that gets lost to organisations, investing in permanent staff is an easy sell, even if you lose a proportion of staff over time. And also the possibility that staff may choose to leave an organisation is not a good enough reason not to invest in them and their development and progression while they're with you. Okay.
Can I come in on that?
Yes, please do.
Yeah, so I so pleased you posted that. It's a matter quite close to my heart how much we invest, as you say, in third parties. Slightly biased, it wouldn't be me being an in-house developer myself. And it's not just the money, it's things like so we still have third parties that we collaborate with. But there's an exchange of information. There's learning on the job that happens all the time. And maybe it's a bit churlish of me to think this, but when I'm collaborating with a third party and we're learning about a new system and taking advice from each other, I am aware that that other person is not in my organization. So all that learning has been taken out to support that third party's organization to secure contracts elsewhere. So in terms of the knowledge transfer, that's not helping us directly. It might help us indirectly because we can go back to them and they'll have that knowledge for future projects. But it would be better if we had people in-house that we could train up and learn things on the job with and share information with, and then I would feel like it would be a very worthwhile thing to do that, because that's permanent staff that's being retained. So all that not gained knowledge is also retained. And then, as you say, if the staff leaves, with this learned knowledge. Well, isn't that life? I mean, don't all staff gain knowledge and move on and things like that? That just seems normal. So,
yeah, thank you, Alan. I think the lesson here is to prepare for that, isn't it? And maybe it's a little bit more frequent in digital than other circles, or as Lauren pointed out at the beginning, maybe it's more of the sort of younger generation now with their expectations to move on in 3 years. Okay. Right, well, questions have slowed down and people are realizing that it's very much lunchtime. So I think we better bring things to a close there. I just want to say a massive thank you to our panelists. So Tara, much appreciated. Thank you for your time. Alan, thank you very much for joining us as well. And Lauren, special mention to you because you've been with us right through the entire series and we've all benefited from your input and expertise. As I mentioned at the beginning, we have recorded all of these sessions. They're available on the CDPS YouTube channel. So if you've missed anything, please head over to our YouTube channel. You can find us really straightforwardly. I've put links in the chat, so you should be able to find those links at the beginning of the chat as well. But any questions, please get in touch with us at the centre. And there have been some requests to connect people in the background, so we'll pick up on those as well, particularly asking about apprenticeships and managing that and bringing people together to talk about that sort of thing. So there we go. Thank you ever so much. Much appreciated. Thank you ever so much to our audience. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for participating and all those questions. And we will see you all again soon.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.